I just saw a headline that said, like, Pierre Poilievre survives leadership with 87. You consistently have narratives that don't reflect reality from the chattering classes, from the punditry class. Stay tuned. I'm going to call it right here. You can play this back. That the new narrative is, when does Pierre Poilievre pivot out of talking about affordability, out of immigration, out of the crime crisis that we're in? And I assure you, we're not going to pivot out of that.
Journalism commentary 1 year anniversary.
I don't believe journalism being funded by the government is the solution.
You have to rebuild the foundation. You have to retell the stories. Market conservative other news that actually matters.
I hence wanted to ask. I think they should answer their questions, especially if they're politically charged.
Hi, Yali Cantin-Nantel here at the Conservative Party convention in Calgary. Pierre Poilievre has won his leadership review with 87.4% of the vote, a very strong endorsement for his leadership to continue. That said, he's not out of the woods completely, because Mark Carney apparently now wants a spring snap election amidst him not being able to get a deal with Donald Trump. So I wanted to speak to someone who knows the Conservative Party and knows Pierre Poilievre very well, and that's his deputy leader, Melissa Lantsman. I had her react to the leadership review results. I got her takes on the legacy media narratives around that and how conservatives are going to be ready for the next snap election, if there is one in the spring. Without further ado, here is our interview. Well, I'm here at the Conservative Convention with Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman. Melissa, Pierre Poilievre won his leadership review with 87.4%. I want to get your reaction to that.
I just saw a headline that said, like, Pierre Poilievre survives leadership with 87. I think 87 is a massive number that tells the country what we told them before, that our party's united, that our movement is united, and that we can go forward and speak on behalf of the 8 million Canadians that sent us to Ottawa.
You mentioned that headline. I saw that headline too. And I mean, the legacy media and liberals, they were saying prior to this leadership review that Pierre Poilievre had a leadership crisis, that he was not going to maybe even do well in the leadership review. And in fact, there were some people even that I spoke to that were not very confident he would get that much more over 80. He got 87. Isn't this just proof that this whole narrative was kind of not really based in reality, that Pierre somehow has a leadership crisis when he gets 87%?
Well, I think you consistently have narratives that don't reflect reality from the chattering classes, from the punditry class, and that's just to make a story. Remember, when conservatives are fighting each other, they're not fighting liberals, and that's exactly what special interest groups want. I know the next iteration of this, now that we're beyond a leadership review with a united party, it's going to be, when are you going to pivot to stop talking about the things that Canadians actually care about? So stay tuned. I'm going to call it right here. You can play this back. That the new narrative is, when does Pierre Poilievre pivot out of talking about affordability, out of immigration, out of the crime crisis that we're in? And I assure you, we're not going to pivot out of that.
What was funny is when conservatives talk about culture wars, they say, why don't you talk about affordability? And then when you talk about affordability, they complain about that too, it seems. Melissa, as deputy leader, you travel a lot across the country, and of course you also spend time in your riding. Carney's almost been prime minister for a year. What are people telling you? Are they satisfied? Has affordability improved under Mark Carney? Has quality of life improved under Mark Carney?
I think you're seeing if we're going to get serious about the conversation, I think you're seeing, two very different Canadas, depending on where you live, how old you are, where you are in that life cycle. And for a big portion of the population, owning a home, putting food on the table, getting a job out of school, it just feels further and further out of reach. And you hear all of the nice words, but nothing's actually changed for you. And I think for a big segment of the population, if you own a home, you've got high asset values, you maybe draw your income from investments, the world looks very different for you. And you traveling the country, depending on where you are, you see that, and you see that sort of everywhere, from coast to coast to coast.
There's talk that Mark Carney wants a spring snap election. Do you think that will happen? And How are you guys as the Conservative Party getting ready for that possibility?
Well, I'm not a pundit, so I don't engage in. The only person that knows if they want an election is Mark Carney, but he was just elected less than a year ago with a mandate to actually fix things. And what we've seen is a high word count from podiums and not a whole lot of outcomes when it comes to matching those words. So our job is to hold him to account, to propose solutions, and to expose the things that Canadians aren't seeing. And that's what we're going back to Ottawa to do on Monday as a united party.
If I may ask, if he does call a snap election, he'll likely go, I would say, ultra elbows up, and you'll double and triple down on this narrative, and the media will help him with that. Last time, the Conservatives, it allowed them to defeat Pierre's incredible lead in the polls. How are you guys going to do something different for that this time that doesn't work again, and they're actually not able to seemingly have a great gaslighting of Canadians into re-voting for Mark Carney, even though his first term arguably has not been very impressive?
Look, I can't keep track of where everybody's elbows are, but what I do know is that there are, Canadians on the front lines of our auto sector, of our steel, of our aluminum, of our forestry sectors who are losing jobs, and they expected him to do the thing that he was going to say he was going to do. They expected him to have a deal with the U.S. by the 21st of July. Still, we're not there, and it seems like we're further and further away. I want to go back to Ottawa and make sure that we're focusing on the exact things that people on the ground are telling us to focus on, and that's what we're going to do.
Lastly, yesterday when Pierre Poilievre denounced anti-Semitism, it had very loud applause and lots of support from people in the room. We're seeing in the United States some parts of the right-wing commentariat engage in an anti-Israel and, I would argue, anti-Semitic talking points narratives. Does it make you feel good that here in Canada the movement seems to be still very much against anti-Semitism and very much in favor of Israel?
Yeah, look, it makes me feel good, but it doesn't make it any different that if you are, if you are a Jew in this country, the last 2.5 years for you have seen a government that has just left you out high and dry. Every iteration of this party, from the earliest iterations under Stockwell Day right through Stephen Harper, and before that on the other side of the country, Brian Mulroney, we have stood with moral clarity. We've done what's principled and not what's popular, and we wish we saw that from the government. And instead, you see a government that turns its back on gunshots into schools and fire bombings into businesses. And I'm always proud to stand with a party and with a leader who will denounce that and actually do something about it, have law enforcement enforce the laws and make everybody feel safe in this country. This isn't just a Jewish problem. It is a Canadian problem, and when they're done with the Saturday people, they come for the Sunday people next.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, Melissa Lantsman, these were all my questions. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thanks. I hope you had a great convention, and if you didn't come to this one, make sure you're at the next one because you missed a good time.
Well, this concludes our interview with Melissa Lantsman. I hope you liked it. If you did, then be sure to like, share, follow, and comment. And if you enjoy independent journalism that is not funded by the government, then consider becoming a paid member or subscriber. And if you want to support our Conservative Convention Fund, it costs about $3,000 to send my colleague and myself to Calgary. So there's a link to the Give, Send, Go down below. Thank you and God bless.